Thanks for listening to Baxies Musical Podcast. If you like what you hear today, be sure to subscribe to it, rate it, share it, tell everyone you know about it, follow along and get updates on future episodes, and be sure to check out some of our older episodes too, because God knows there's a whole hell of a lot of them. Today, we're brought to you by Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee. Check out their state-of-the-art dealership next to BJ's and Big Y on Memorial Drive, or go to metrojeep.com and drive home in your new Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram today.
It's Baxie's Musical Podcast. Resistance is useless.
As you know, record companies, radio stations, and even record stores like putting music in separate categories. It makes stuff easier to find, easier to consume, and from a business standpoint, much easier to market. The problem is that some musical categories change over the course of time, and when they do, the music industrial complex likes to reconfigure these things to make them even easier to consume. At least that's what they used to do. In the late 1970s, the things that were once considered to be punk were no longer punk enough. And while nobody was getting particularly rich off punk rock, many considered the whole genre to be completely untenable. And while much of the country, and much of the world for that matter, was either repulsed or turned off by the idea of punk, they didn't really have much of a problem with the idea of new wave, which, if we're being honest, was largely a recategorization of punk combined with more commercially digestible elements of pop. Remember, Blondie and Talking Heads were once both considered to be punk bands. That wasn't until they became more commercially viable, at which point you absolutely needed a new classification, since the old classifications were no longer getting the job done. By 1979, new wave was everywhere, and for the next decade, there were hundreds of bands pumping out commercially viable singles that, to this day, are instantly recognizable. And by 1982, MTV was beginning turning many of these songs into bona fide video classics. But for a brief 2-year period, there would be a number of new wave bands that would release some massive hits even before MTV hit the ground running. And the list of those songs are impressive too. Among those bands included the Vapors, whose 1980 single Turning Japanese became an international hit both here in the States and in their home country of Great Britain. It was one of those songs that helped define not only the entire new wave category, it would become one of the most defining songs of the entire decade. Unfortunately, as it often happens, Turning Japanese was such a big success that it overshadowed the fact that their debut album, Nuclear Days, was loaded with great songs. The same thing was true for their follow-up record, the vastly underrated album Magnets from 1981. These were two great albums. Unfortunately, with the music industry being what it is, the Vapors suffered from a lack of support from their record company, and the second record went largely ignored. And unfortunately, the band dissolved later that year. But this is a band that was discovered by, managed by, and opened up for The Jam in 1979. This was a band that was able to crack the charts in the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The band would reform in 2016. And 4 years later, they would finally release their first album in 29 years, 2020's Together, which also featured a number of really great songs. But on March 23rd, the Vapors will release their next album called Wasp in a Jar. And having heard it, I have to tell you, it's an absolute blast and as good as anything they've ever done. This summer, the Vapors will be back in the States on the Lost 80s live tour, along with Big Country, A Flock of Seagulls, General Public, Belouis Some, China Crisis, and several others. The tour comes to the Westfield Music Bowl in New Haven, Connecticut on July 31st, and on August 1st, they'll be at the Wang Theater in Boston. To talk about the band, the new record, and about the tour is bass player Steve Smith from the Vapors on Baxie's Musical Podcast. I got an email from your publicist, and he sent the link of the new record, and he says, "Wait till you hear this record; it's going to absolutely floor you." And after and after listening to it, he was right. So, congratulations on a great effort, and congratulations on finding a publicist that gives a shit. That's
Well, thank you for both of those things.
So I went to high school in the 80s. I remember the Vapors. I remember turning Japanese. I remember all of the whole new wave explosion that came to the States. And these songs, are real anthems for many of us of that generation. So to have the chance to see that the band is still around and still cranking out music that is every bit as good as the original stuff, it's really impressive to see you guys pulling that off. It's not a simple task for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's not really. It just all really came together when the band reformed, and Dave started writing songs. I mean, he hadn't written any songs for a long time, and he just started writing songs again, and then we started getting excited about them, and it's just carried on from there, really.
It's been 5 years since the last album when you guys reformed.
Yeah.
This time, this record was successfully crowdsourced, and you were able to get the thing going. Were you surprised by the support of your fans in going through the crowdsourcing route, or were you just excited to get it off the ground?
I was amazed at how much money we managed to raise, because I think it's fairly easy to say we need to raise some money to make an album and make an album. I think that's a reasonably easy thing to do. But what we wanted to try and avoid was what happened with the last album, which was nobody really heard it. It didn't really get anywhere. But the people who did hear it really liked it. So this time I said, well, if we're going to crowdfund it, let's be really ambitious and say we want money for a plugger in America. We want money for a plugger in the UK. We want press in America. We want press in the UK. And actually, the recording cost was quite a small part of the amount of money we raised, which was an incredible amount. I mean, it was over $20,000. It was an incredible amount. And actually, a couple of people then chipped in with other things like paying for the studio time or paying for the mastering. So yeah, we've actually been able to have a small budget for publicity, which I'm hoping is going to make a difference.
So 5 years ago, I mean, it's a blink of an eye compared to like a 32-year hiatus.
Yeah.
But you released the last one, and I know you went your separate ways in 1982. But what was it that made you guys reform after all that time? I think you guys got back together in 2016, I think it was. What was it that got you guys back in touch with each other?
Dave was working as a lawyer for the Musicians Union in the UK, and he got offered early retirement. And his wife said to him, well, I don't want you sitting around the house all day. You need to be doing something. Why don't you try and get the band back together again? And he sort of said, okay, I'll give it a try. And he messaged everyone and said, look, I'm going to be in this bar in St. King's Cross Station in London at this time on this night. Come along and have a chat if you want to. And myself and Ed, the original guitarist, found ourselves down there. And I like what Dave had to say about reforming the band, which is basically, let's just have a really good time this time and not get all angsty about all the things that go wrong. Things go wrong, they go wrong. Let's just try and enjoy it.
Let's have fun and save my marriage at the same time.
Yeah.
So my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong about this. So this album is coming out in February, but there may be more on the way later on in 2025. Is that the plan?
Well, that was a bit of a throwaway comment when I said, that was because someone had asked about the gaps between the albums, and I went, well, at this rate, album 5 will be coming out next year. If the gaps are getting smaller and smaller between the albums. So it was a bit of a throwaway comment, really. We don't have any plans for a 5th album at the moment, unless we possibly do a singles compilation or something like that.
So let me go take it back a little bit, because as I'm researching, for the interview, I stumbled on some things that I completely forgotten about, and I want to ask you about the jam. And my understanding is that you guys were kind of discovered by Bruce Foxton. You guys were playing, he hears you, and all of a sudden he starts to take the Vapors under his wing. Tell me about how that relationship started with Bruce and ultimately, with the Jam and their management company.
Well, it was the second gig that myself and the drummer had done with the Vapors. we'd done our first gig about 10 days previously, and we were playing a Sunday night in a little bar in a place called Farncombe, which is just outside Guildford. It's a small place. Actually, I think it still has bands to this day. It is quite a legendary music venue. But we were playing in there on a Sunday night. Second gig me and the drummer had done with the band. There's no one there. There's 6 or 7 people there. But one of them is Bruce Foxton. And he really liked it. So afterwards he came up and said, look, I really like what you're doing. Have you got a demo? Gave him a demo. And he said, look, I can get you a couple of gigs first on the next jam tour, like in a few weeks. So it was coming up quite quickly. And he was true to his word. We got on a couple of jam gigs, went down well, which was nice. And then he got Paul Weller's dad, John, interested in helping him manage us. And so it was not for a very long while. It's probably only a year or so, but yeah, they managed us, and they made everything happen for us. To be fair,
I mean, what an incredible break. I mean, your second your second gig with the band. It's like, yeah, I think this is going to work out. I think I'm going to stick around with you guys for the next 30 some odd years.
Well, the other thing for me, it was absolutely brilliant, because my favourite band at the time was The Jam. And I was thinking, oh, great, I'm going to get to see The Jam for free twice.
Well, I mean, they were such a huge band back in between 77 to 1980. I mean, as far as a singles band goes, I don't even know if that's ever been matched. 18 top 40 singles. I mean, it's an incredible number from them. But ironically, the Vapors had a hit in the United States, which the Jam could never pull off. I hope if you ever get a chance to see them, you still have the opportunity to remind them of that.
Yeah, I do. I still message Bruce every now and again, actually.
So that whole experience of working with them and being managed by Paul's dad, obviously this sets you up pretty well going into that first record in 1979, Nuclear Days, and with the single Turning Japanese. I mean, to have that experience, and then, I mean, how much influence do you think they had in making that first record, or was it beyond that at that point?
Well, yeah, they did have an influence on that. I think it was pretty much their idea to use Vic Smith, the Jam's producer, because we really didn't have many ideas. We'd used Pete Wilson to do the Prisoner single, which is the first thing we put out, but we weren't sure about using him for an album. And basically, they set up a meeting with Vic, and Vic was enormously taken with Turning Japanese, I have to say. And he could see the possibilities in that song. And yeah, I mean, I really love Vic, and I love that first album. So God bless him.
The first record, ironically, the Vapors are only known for Turning Japanese, but the rest of the record is awesome. I mean, it's such a great record that it's almost a shame that people may not necessarily have dove into it like they should have, because it is, from top to bottom, it's such an enjoyable, great record. When you guys, though, Turning Japanese, it becomes a single, and it becomes this international hit in a lot of ways. How did you guys even respond to that? Did you feel like you were even ready to be thrust into that kind of success right away?
Well, we thought that Turning Japanese might be a big hit. We all knew that there's good potential in that song, and it's very catchy and commercial, and everyone liked it. So we deliberately didn't put it out as our first single. So we put out Prisoners as our first single, but that really sank without trace. Almost like Turning Japanese was almost like our first single, even though it wasn't. I mean, in retrospect, maybe we should have left it for the third single, maybe.
Yeah, but ultimately, you knew what you had in that song, and it's an anthemic song even to this day. That when people hear that opening guitar riff, it's like like instant recognition.
Time travel, isn't it? It's time travel. It's nostalgia. It just takes you back to that moment where you first heard it.
It totally does, and that's what's amazing about it, because in the 80s, when new wave was being the genre of new wave was being kind of introduced. There seemed to be a lot of bands that had that one song, but for whatever reason weren't given the chance to get the support for additional songs. In a way, it happened to a lot of other bands, not just the Vapors, but it did happen to you. And when the second record came out, Magnets, which is also a great, great record, the record company didn't quite support it in the same way, or didn't appear to support it in the same way. Tell me about what happened there, and was it the record company that dropped the ball on that?
Well, what happened to the band was quite strange, really. When we were looking to get signed as a band in the summer of 1979, we had two offers on the table, basically, identical offers. One was from United Artists Record, which was a small label on one floor of a building, probably between 12 and 15 people working on the label in that small building. Or we could have gone to Polydor, which was a bit more corporate. We decided to go with United Artists because they all really liked us. We all really liked them. They had a good roster. They had a history of staying with their bands, not just dropping them after one album if it didn't go too well. So we thought we'll go with United Artists. Within 4 months of us doing that, United Artists was bought out by EMI Records. Everyone we knew was sacked. And this is why Turning Japanese is riding high. All of a sudden, everyone we know at our label is gone. And so when we walked into EMI for the first time, it's a different building. Nobody knew who we were. Nobody knew we had a record that was supposed to be coming out because they stuck to the release schedule. So we had a single coming out, but nobody at the record company. And so things really, really changed for us. Just not just between album 1 and album 2, but between single 2 and single 3, everything changed. And also at that point, the Jam had just gone stratospherically massive. And John and Bruce were going, we're so busy, we can't give you the time that you need. You need to find some new management. So we lost our record company and our management in a very small period of time when we were supposed to be, flying high with our big head. It was a strange time. And so we were signed to a different label when the second album came out. I mean, ironically, I think in America, they did give us a little bit of promotion, but in the UK, it was really nothing.
So as 4 young guys who are feeling this wave of success with Turning Japanese, and all of a sudden things start to turn around, I mean, where did that leave you guys as a band? I mean, obviously, it starts to fracture at some point, but I mean, you had to be just stunned by this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really big shock. It was a really big shock. We were flying high, and then all of a sudden there was loads of all the worries came back. The worries that you thought had gone all came back up again. It led to the end of the band really, because we went to do a demo for a single on a Friday. No, we were going to do the recording at the weekend on a Saturday and Sunday. And our A&R person came down to listen to the track we were going to do. He said, "Great lads, really like it. Can I take a tape away?" And then the next thing we knew, he pulled the studio time. And Dave just said, "Well, this record company don't have any belief in us whatsoever. I've had enough. I can't work like this anymore." So eventually it led to the breakup of the band.
So the band breaks up and you all start, going off into your own ways. You're, talking about, Dave having a legal career. I mean, Howard was a small business owner. Ed went into directing television, but it seemed like you were the one that kind of attempted to stay within music. In fact, I was just listening on YouTube, Onto the Wheel from Shoot Dispute.
Oh, right.
And I liked it. I thought it was really, really good. I said, "Man, this guy's funky as hell." And it was very, very cool to listen to, knowing how that you continue to play. Tell me a little bit about Shoot Dispute.
Well, that was basically me and 3 of my friends. That after the Vapors split, I felt I didn't really feel like doing music that much after the Vapors split. It was quite a chastening experience. I did a few gigs with a rockabilly covers band for a while, but I wasn't really interested in putting a band together. But just hanging out with mates, and we just said, well, what? They were like in a kind of punk band as well. But I was like, I don't really want to do that kind. I just want to do something a bit different. And so it just came out of friends messing around. And we almost got there. We almost got there. John Peel was a big fan.
I was going to ask you about that because you did a Peel session in '84. What was his reaction to you guys?
He loved us. So we played. He used to do a road show where he'd go out and play records and have bands, and he'd always make sure there was a local band on. And he'd ask the local independent record shop which local band he should have on. We did one of those, and he said, "Oh, I really like what you're doing. I'd like you to do a session." And we were on the radio within a week, which was pretty fast. And we actually did 2 sessions for him, and which are both actually on YouTube somewhere. And we also did he did a week-long thing at the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London, the ICA, where he had 3 bands a night for 4 nights, and we played that as well. He was a big fan.
So what eventually happened to Shoot Dispute? Did you just decide you didn't want to continue, or did it fall apart? What was the end of that?
Yeah, we were on an upward trajectory, and then I realised we all realised we hadn't quite got over the top of the hill, and we were falling back the other way. And it just felt like it just kind of stopped. That was it. It just stopped.
So by the time you guys finally get together in 2016, you've all been through some pretty big changes. Your lives have gone on, and all of a sudden you're not a 20-year-old kid anymore playing in a band. You're all, mature, middle-aged men who are getting back together. How is it different playing with the Vapors today as opposed to what it was like 40 years ago?
I think we're a lot more relaxed about it now. We don't feel we're competing with anyone. We don't feel we've got to make a louder noise than anyone else. We're all completely comfortable with what we do. And yeah, we just a lot more relaxed these days.
And as it turns out, you've actually been together this time around longer than you were around the first time around.
First time around, I mean, really, the band with the 4 of us was from February. I worked it out the other day, February 1979 until September 1981. So it's just 2.5 years, really.
One of the things that was talked about for many, many years about the song, and you probably know where I'm going to go with this, the whole nonsense about turning Japanese being about masturbation. I mean, I know it's nonsense, but where does that come from? Because that whole rumor comes from, because I mean, to be honest, I've never masturbated to that song.
I have to say, and I'm going to throw this right back at you, I never ever heard that phrase used in that way until we went to America. The first time we went to America, one of the very first interviews we did, the guy went, "So, turning Japanese, that's British slang for masturbation, right?" And we all looked at each other and went, "No." but it came from America. Someone in America decided that. I don't know who it was, but we had. I can promise you, I'd never ever heard that phrase before I heard the song. Before I heard the song, that wasn't a phrase in British language. It wasn't slang. No one ever went, "Oh, I'm turning Japanese," ever. The first time I ever heard the phrase was when I heard the song.
Well, leave it to Americans to find the filthiest gutter to pull something into. I always thought it was like a preposterous, insinuation, because even I had never heard of that before until all of a sudden these rumors were out. Like, really? What are you talking about?
It was really bizarre. It was really bizarre.
Yeah. So the Vapors are touring in March, I believe. You're doing a bunch of dates with Big Country in April, and then you're coming to the States late July, early August. In fact, you're coming to New Haven, Connecticut on July 31st, and then on August 1st you'll be in Boston at the Bosch Center at the Wang Center, part of the Lost 80s live tour. The lineup of this is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. We've done a couple of those before. We did a 22 shows in 2019, which was the first time we did it, which is just an amazing experience. And we did 6 shows last year.
Yeah.
So this will be our 3rd time. We're like the veterans now.
And what's been the reaction to the Vapors?
It's been great. like you say, everyone knows Turning Japanese. Everyone's dancing to it. I love those 80s shows because they're just such fun. You just play your best known ones, and then somebody else comes and has a go. And then you can play to a much larger audience. Last year we did some of our own shows on the East Coast after we'd done the 6 Lost 80s shows. But this year we're doing 6 weekends of 4 shows a week. So I think after that we're just going to want to go home.
Yeah, I would think you would. But the lineup is really great. I mean, it's Big Country, Flock of Seagulls, General Public, China Crisis, Belouis Some, Josie Cotton, a couple others. I'm actually really happy that you guys got Belouis Some on that tour. He was about to tour the United States with The Alarm, and Mike Peters got sick again and didn't get his chance. But I interviewed him, and just an incredible story about a guy who stopped performing for years until he performed one day, and the crowd wound up singing all the songs with him. It's an amazing story. Neville's something else.
Oh, right. I look forward to meeting him. We have some mutual friends, so I know he's a good guy.
Yeah, he totally is. You'll enjoy him. So this tour goes on, for quite a while during the summer. Once it's done, once everything is said and done, I mean, do you have plans to keep playing, or are you just going to take a good break from it all?
No, well, I think we should have some shows at the end of this year with another band doing a co-headline. I can't say any more than that at the moment in the UK. And that'll take us up to the end of the year. And as far as 2026 goes, we're going to do another Port Merion weekender in March of 26. And that's as far as we go at the moment.
Very good. Steve, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. I wish you best of luck with the new record. It really is awesome, and I can't wait to see you guys when you come out to the States.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you very much, Steve. Best of luck.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
The new album from the Vapors, Wasp in a Jar, is being released on March 23rd, and their show at the Wang Theater in Boston is coming up on August 1st as part of the Lost 80s live tour. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. You can reach me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee for their support, but most of all, thanks to all of you for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast.